Lorraine. Thanks very much for coming out. So, Mark, thanks very much for joining me. As everybody can see down the back, we've got GP, and anyone who came through Dublin Airport, I'm sure, saw the brand in there as well. But just for anybody who isn't aware, do you want to give me a quick overview of GP, just for our lovely audience, please?
Sure, thank you, and great to be here. Yesterday was International Women's Day. We're actually a female-founded and led company. Nicole Sahin founded GP in 2012. Also, she founded an industry, which is the employer of record industry. So what do? The marketing says that we break down barriers to global business by making it easy to employ people compliantly around the world. Really what that means is companies that are expanding globally, that need to have people on the ground in certain locations very quickly, we facilitate that. They don't need to have entities, they don't need to have offices set up. You can really employ people in a matter of often days but weeks instead of sort of months. And what we've seen is, for the first 7 or 8 years of our business, it was helping companies expand globally, putting that salesperson on the ground in a new region, testing a new market. Since the pandemic, obviously, remote working works. What we're seeing now is, building that global remote workforce. You can't find the right talent in Dublin or London or San Francisco, spreading the net a little bit wider. So that's sort of the crux of the business.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And are there any specific industries that you see tend to lean a little bit more towards that model?
Yeah, it's interesting because the topic of this is the power of people and place. And our business is built on the premise that work is no longer a place. And actually, remote is a place. If you go on Indeed or LinkedIn, you can actually search for remote as a location. That really tends to be knowledge-based roles. So a lot of technology, all the ed tech, fintech, health tech, those types of things. That's traditionally been it. But we actually have a lot of customers in industries that we wouldn't expect. So I run a product called GP Recruit, which helps people recruit around the world. I was expecting we'd be doing software developers in India, we'd be doing business development people in Singapore. The first role that we placed was a supply chain manager for an American pet food company in Thailand who wanted to be close to their supplier. So they sit on site with the supplier halfway around the world. So it is certainly knowledge-based works, professional services, obviously technology, but we're quite surprised at the use cases. So we try to not focus on an industry, not focus on specific roles, but really let our customers tell us how they can use us and provide that sort of solution.
Definitely. I actually know, even just from my own experience of working with GP, one of the first positions that we were working on, I think, was a sales for horticulture LED lighting, and it was an Asian company, and I was like, where the hell am I starting with this? But we got there, exactly, so it was all good. But yeah, definitely, I would have been actually very surprised. I thought it would go more tech there. But yeah, in terms of advantages and disadvantages of a distributed workforce, how have you found that?
Yeah, it's an evolving space. Robert started with the remote sort of rewind or pullback, which is great, and then Lars talked about the future of work and the war for talent, which is all those buzzwords I was going to talk about, so I'm going to have to think of something else to talk about. In terms of, there's a lot of advantages. One is, in times when there is a talent crunch, and there is a talent crunch in a lot of locations, a lot of industry sectors, just being able to spread the net a little bit wider. Look at the types of talent that you want. Look in regions or time zones, or looking for language sort of families, rather than having that commutable distance around the office. This can be domestically in some cases, and often for us it's international. Yeah. Diversity is key. If you hire globally, if you hire across borders, you're automatically building diversity into your business. And I think the world is very volatile, it's unpredictable. We need diverse thoughts and ideas and people and experiences around the table to deal with problems that we haven't experienced before. So I think there are a couple of the key things. There's sometimes cost advantages in going different locations. There are challenges, and I think the challenge of managing remote working, when we were working from home, we had to sort of get up to speed very quickly, but now we've stabilized into this way of working. Some of the challenges around managing people, you cannot manage somebody when they're sitting in their office watching their kid run behind them to go for a shower. You have to lead them, you have to lead by, focus on the objectives and the outcomes and those types of things. That's quite tough for some people to really to make that switch from managing people to leading and talking about, having a purpose and a mission. And really NASA's coming later, and obviously their mission is much bigger than the world itself.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So we've actually had to change the way that we do things. There's a lot of other challenges in terms of companies that work in a hybrid model. You can create two different populations. Those people that are working remotely, those people that are working from an office or have access to leadership physically. And we're in HR, proximity bias is a real thing. So there's some of the challenges. But I think what we've seen is there's a lot of companies that are really willing to take this. And we do it ourselves. As the Americans, we're an American company. As Americans, we say, drink our own Kool-Aid. We're doing this. But we're also helping, and we're learning from our customers, packaging up, codifying it, working, what works for us, what works for our customers, and helping people to understand that. Because a lot of people, it's a journey. It is still quite new. That tug of war that Robert was talking about, it's actually very, very real in what we do. So you've got to balance the advantages against the challenges that you have. But I think the one thing is there's a lot of expertise in the room, and that's the reason we come to these conferences. What works for you? How do we learn new things? And I think that's what keeps it interesting from an industry perspective, and also from a GP perspective. But the future of work, it was yesterday, but it's also tomorrow as well. And we can kind of create that, and we don't know what's coming, but we do know that we've got the skill, the toolkit to do that, and we've got the agility to do that, because otherwise we wouldn't have survived the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah,
100%. And I'm actually going to bring it back. So I know you mentioned Nicole earlier on. So obviously founder and now returning CEO for GP. Anytime I've interacted with GP, it doesn't matter if it's the GP recruit side or across the rest of the company, it's very clear that in each element and any person I work with, everyone understands their purpose. So back to Simon Sinek's, your reason for why. So how do you feed that through in a distributed workforce, and how do you make sure it's clearly communicated, especially if it's a distributed workforce globally?
When I joined GP, it's coming up to 2 years ago, and I still don't know the answers to that, but I just think there's lots of things. We're very intentional. You mentioned sort of the deliberate part about it. We're very intentional. We are a remote-first company, and in January 2022, if you see a press release for us, it used to say Globalization Partners, Boston, Massachusetts, today announced, etc. It says GP, remote-first company. So even sending that message in every communication that we're a remote-first company, really looking at being very intentional about when we develop practices, ways of working, those types of things, we make the assumption that everyone is remote. So even though people do work for an office, we've got people that do work hybrid, if you build those structures, the type of company that we are, we think about everyone is remote, so that we're providing sort of a level playing field. We're looking for that population. We're not trying to set different things. That means we had to unwind a lot of things that we did. We have a remote-first playbook. There's a lot of managers, there's a lot of people internally within the teams that come in that haven't worked in this type of environment before. So what does it mean to work remotely? How do you put guidelines around that? We don't tell people what to do. It's not a policy. Here's the 5 things you need to do. It's a case of, these are some of the challenges that we will face. These are some of the things that we've done in the past that work. So golden hours, right? So you've got teams distributed across a number of different locations. There's probably an hour or 2 that they overlap. That hour or 2 is team time. That's not time to do your focus work. That's not time to answer emails. That's the 2 hours a day that is semi-convenient for a lot of people. So we really sort of focus on that. Where we do have offices, office locations, you can live across the street from the Galway office. You're still not allowed to go in there more than a couple of days a week.
Oh, really?
So we're trying to say to people, you work remote first. That is there. It's a collaboration hub. It's not an office. It's, if you need it to be there, it's certainly there. I think there's a lot of small things that we do, but it feeds into the culture, and it's tangible. And I've been sort of working for 25 years, and I've worked in offices where there has been a culture, very strong culture. But I worked at GP, and I didn't meet anyone for the first 6 or 7 months that I was there. And I've never worked in a company with a stronger culture. But what we do is we don't hire for culture fit. The purpose is very important. The purpose is connecting people with opportunities globally, right? Allowing companies to tap into the best talent around the world. So everybody that works for us has that purpose. So we go back, NASA's got their sort of mission. You've got that North Star. So everybody that we have has that North Star, and it's the same. And we look at the way we do things. The other thing we do is when we're looking at hiring people, we want people that are just innately curious. So I've got team members in 9 different countries. I know about their holidays, I know about the foods that they eat, I know about what happened on the weekend, because I'm curious about it. So if we have 1,200 people that are just curious about everything, they ask questions, and it builds that connectivity that is sometimes hard to do in an office. If you're in an office of 5,000 people, morning, you go to your desk, you sit there, you have a cup of coffee with your colleague. We actually intentionally do that, and I think it's really around hiring people with the right mindset in the beginning. Obviously, they've got the skills and experience to do the work, but if they're focused on the purpose and the mission, and they really ask questions, and they're willing to make mistakes, and they're saying, what are your gender pronouns? What are they? And somebody in another location, I don't even know what gender pronouns are. There's not even a thing in my location. So it's kind of a secret sauce, but it's a cool place to be in and to learn.
It's funny, actually, Jennifer Maguire, who shout out to her wherever she is in the audience, we do a coffee catch-up similar to what you'd mentioned there, so it's obviously feeding through into your partners too, which is brilliant. And then final piece of advice then, so for anyone in the audience who's thinking of a distributed workforce or moving into that model, what's your kind of key takeaway or your secret sauce there, I guess?
Come and talk to us. No, I mean, to be honest, what I would say is that access to talent has never been easier, and building diverse teams has never been easier, but it's also never been more complex. You don't need to become an expert in HR in certain locations. If you've got 2 or 3 people spread out across 10 or 20 countries in teams, do you really want to build your HR capability, expertise, payroll, legal, compliance on that? We do that. There's a lot of other companies in our space that do that. But there's also expertise. People have done this before. And I think when we started, you talked about sort of technology companies, knowledge-based companies. There's a lot of people from that industry sector here who probably manage those types of teams. So don't try and do it for yourself in the beginning. Learn from others. Learn from those mistakes. Really understand that when you're building this, you have to be intentional. You've got to really think about it. Why are we doing this? What is the value of having these teams? And remind yourself every day of the value of a distributed workforce, because it's challenging some days. And there's a lot of things that you can do to make it work, but there's also very small things that don't work, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned. So I say, work with experts. It doesn't have to be work with a provider such as ourselves, but talk to people and learn, because people have made those mistakes before, and I think that's why it's great coming to conferences. And we had the thing yesterday at the Guinness Storehouse. I learned a lot of things that people say, well, we tried that and it didn't work, and it's worked for 10 companies I'm aware of, but now there's the 11th company it didn't work for. It's not a law, it's kind of a theory. We're still trying to work through it.
The trial and error, for sure.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Look, it's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been very, very interesting. And anyone come and grab the GP guys today if you're interested in hearing more.